Commander Jake Morrison stood at the window of the space station, watching Earth turn slowly below him. The blue planet looked peaceful from up here. No wars, no fighting, no violence. Just like it had been for the past 300 years. Jake had never seen a real battle. None of his friends had either. War was something from the history books, something their great-great-grandparents had lived through during the terrible global wars of the 22nd century. Those wars had been so bad that humanity had sworn never to fight again. The door behind him opened with a soft hiss. Dr. Lisa Grant walked in, holding a datapad and looking excited. "Jake, you need to see this," she said. "We just got a message. From deep space, it's not from Earth." Jake turned around. Lisa worked for the Galactic Relations Institute. She spent her days looking for signs of alien life. For years, she had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. "What kind of message?" Jake asked. Lisa touched her datapad and a hologram appeared in the air. Strange symbols floated in front of them, moving in patterns that almost looked like writing. "It's a language," Lisa said, "an alien language." "And Jake, they're trying to talk to us?" Jake felt his heart beat faster. First contact. The moment humanity had been waiting for since they first looked at the stars. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. The aliens called themselves the Zilani Confederacy. They were friendly and curious about humans. Their ships looked like giant flowers made of metal and light. When they spoke through their translation machines, their voices sounded like music. The Zilani were impressed by human technology. They liked how peaceful Earth had become. They wanted to trade and share knowledge. Earth's government, the United Planetary Council, welcomed them with open arms. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded the exploration ship Aurora. She was one of the first humans to visit a Zilani ship. The aliens were tall and thin, with skin that changed colors like a rainbow. They moved gracefully and spoke softly. "Your species has found great wisdom," the Zilani leader told Amy. "To choose peace over war is the mark of true intelligence." Amy felt proud. Humanity had learned from its mistakes. They had built a better world, but not everyone was happy about the aliens. Admiral Pete Collins was old enough to remember the stories his grandfather told about the wars. He had spent his whole life in the military, but he had never fought a real enemy. "I don't trust them," Pete told the council. "No species becomes peaceful by choice. Something made them that way." The politicians laughed at him. "Admiral, you're looking for problems where none exist," they said. "The Zilani are our friends." Pete shook his head but said nothing more. He went back to his office and looked at the old war records. Humanity had been very good at fighting once. Too good. The global wars had almost destroyed the planet. Meanwhile, engineer Ben Taylor worked on the deep space monitoring stations. These machines watched the empty areas between stars, looking for asteroids or other dangers. Lately, the machines had been picking up strange signals. Ben studied the data on his computer. The signals were very faint, coming from far away. They looked like the energy signatures of spaceship engines. Lots of spaceship engines. "Lisa, you should see this," Ben called to Dr. Grant, who was visiting his station. Lisa looked at the screen. The signals formed patterns across the star map. "What am I looking at?" "Fleet movements," Ben said quietly. "Big ones. Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands, all moving in the same direction." "Toward what?" Ben pointed to a cluster of stars on the map. "Toward the Zilani home systems." Lisa felt cold. "Are you sure? The math doesn't lie?" "Someone is moving a massive fleet towards Zilani space. And Lisa, some of these signals are coming from systems that used to have colonies." "Used to have?" "They went dark 3 months ago. No communications, no trade ships, nothing. Like they just disappeared." Lisa stared at the screen. The peaceful galaxy suddenly seemed much darker. The next day, all communication with the Zilani stopped. Their trade ships didn't arrive. Their friendly messages ended. The beautiful flower ships that had orbited Earth simply vanished. For 2 weeks, there was silence. The council sent messages but got no replies. Captain Rodriguez took the Aurora to the last known Zilani position. but found nothing except empty space and floating debris. Then the refugees started arriving. The first ship was barely holding together. It limped into Earth's outer system, trailing smoke and sparks. Inside were creatures Jake had never seen before. They looked like giant insects with too many arms. They were hurt and scared and barely alive. Dr. Grant worked with the translation computers to understand their language. When she finally heard their story, she wished she hadn't. "The Devourers," the insect creatures said. "They came from the dark between stars. They took our worlds. They took our people. They made us slaves. More refugee ships arrived every day. Each one brought new horrors. There were bird-like aliens with broken wings, fish creatures that breathed water and wept, tears of fear, rock people whose hard skin was cracked and bleeding. They all told the same story. An empire called the Korthak had swept through their region of space like a plague. The Korthak took everything. They stripped planets bare of resources. They captured entire populations and forced them to work until they died. They destroyed anything they couldn't use. Where are the Zilani?" Lisa asked a wounded bird creature. The alien's feathers turned black with sadness. "Gone. The Korthak came to their worlds first. The Zilani tried to fight, but they were too peaceful. They had forgotten how to make war. What happened to them? The lucky ones died quickly." Admiral Collins stood in the council chambers, facing the politicians who had laughed at him weeks before. The refugee ships filled the viewing screens behind him. "How many ships does this Korthak Empire have?" asked the council president. Collins looked at the intelligence reports. "Our best estimate is 10,000 warships, maybe more." The room fell silent. "And Earth's fleet? 400 ships? Most of them are exploration vessels or cargo haulers. We have maybe 50 ships that could fight in a real battle." Someone in the crowd whispered, "We're doomed." Collins shook his head. "Maybe not. Humanity has advantages these aliens don't understand. We've been studying their attack patterns. The Korthak are brutal, but they're not creative. They use the same tactics over and over. What are you suggesting?" "That we remember who we used to be." The president looked confused. "Admiral, we're a peaceful species now. We chose that path for good reasons." Collins walked to the window and looked down at Earth. 300 years ago, our ancestors were the best warriors in known space. They were so good at war that they almost destroyed themselves. That's why we chose peace. He turned back to the council. But choosing peace doesn't mean forgetting how to fight. And sometimes fighting is the only way to protect peace. On the viewing screen, another refugee ship appeared. This one was different. It was a Zilani vessel, but it was damaged and dark. As it got closer, they could see that most of it had been torn apart. The rescue teams found only one survivor. A young Zilani, barely alive, clutching a data crystal in her rainbow-colored hands. Dr. Grant helped translate the crystal's message. The Zilani's voice was weak but clear. "People of Earth," the message began. "We tried to warn the Korthak about you. We told them that humans were not what they seemed. We told them about the old stories, the legends of the sleeping warriors. They did not listen." The alien coughed and her skin flickered between colors. "The Korthak think you are weak because you choose peace. They do not understand that the strongest warriors are those who choose not to fight. They are coming for you now. They think you will be easy prey." The message crackled with static. "We have seen your history files. We know what your people were capable of before you chose to sleep. The Korthak have never faced anything like what humans become when they are truly threatened." The Zilani's voice grew fainter. "They think they are waking up sheep. They do not know they are waking up wolves. Perhaps that is what the galaxy needs. Perhaps it is time for the sleeping gods of war to wake up." The message ended. Commander Morrison stood in the silent council chamber, looking at the faces around him. For 3 centuries, humanity had been the peaceful children of Earth. They had built a perfect society based on cooperation and understanding, but outside their solar system, something dark was coming. Something that had destroyed dozens of civilizations and enslaved entire species. Something that thought humans would be easy victims. Jake thought about his comfortable life, his peaceful duties, his world without war. Then he thought about the refugee ships and the destroyed colonies and the Korthek empire that was heading toward Earth. Maybe it was time to remember what humanity had been before they learned to sleep. Maybe it was time to wake up. The Korthek Empire arrived at humanity's outer colonies like a storm made of metal and fire. Their ships were massive, dark things that looked like they were built to cause pain. Each one was the size of a small city, covered in weapons that could destroy planets. Captain Tony Brooks was flying patrol around New Haven Colony when the enemy fleet appeared. One moment he was looking at empty space, the next moment the sky was full of alien warships. "Command, this is Brooks," he said. Into his radio, "I'm seeing multiple contacts. Really big ones. How many ships, Brooks?" Tony looked at his scanner. The numbers kept climbing. "Hundreds, maybe thousands, they're everywhere." The first Korthak ship opened fire. A beam of red energy hit New Haven's defense station and turned it into glowing dust. Then another beam hit the colony's main city. In seconds, 1,000,000 people were dead. Tony felt something strange happen inside his head. The world became very clear and very slow. He could see exactly where each enemy ship was going to move before it moved. His hands started flying over the controls. Without him thinking about it, his small fighter shouldn't have been able to hurt the giant Korthak ships. But somehow, Tony knew exactly where to shoot. He fired his missiles at spots that looked harmless, but caused the enemy ships to blow up. "Brooks, what are you doing out there?" his commander asked. Tony didn't know how to answer. He was doing things no pilot training had ever taught him. But it felt right. It felt like he had done this before. Many times. "I'm fighting," he said. Back on Earth, the news was terrible. 12 colonies had been attacked. Most of them were gone. The few survivors who escaped told stories of the Korthek that made people sick to hear. General Kate Mitchell stood in the military command center, looking at the reports. She had been a peacekeeper for 20 years. Her job was to stop arguments between people, not fight alien monsters. "How many ships did they use?" she asked. "At least 2,000, said her aide. "Our colonies had maybe 50 defense ships total. They didn't stand a chance." Kate felt angry. Not just upset, but angry. In a way that scared her. She wanted to hurt the things that had hurt her people. She wanted to make them pay for what they had done. The feeling was so strong it made her hands shake. She had never felt anything like it before. Dr. Sam Hughes worked in the military archives. His job was to study old battles and learn from them. But the battles he studied were hundreds of years old. He never thought he would need to use that knowledge. Now he was reading everything he could find about the global wars. The more he read, the more worried he became. Not about the Korthek, but about what humanity might become. "The soldiers in the global wars," he told his assistant. "They weren't normal humans, not by the end." "What do you mean?" Sam showed him a video from the final battle of the Third Global War. Human soldiers were moving through a ruined city, fighting enemy troops. But they moved wrong. Too fast, too coordinated, like they could read each other's minds. They called it the Fury State, Sam said. Humans under extreme stress began showing abilities that shouldn't be possible. Enhanced reflexes, tactical awareness, almost like they could see the future. That's impossible. The government thought so too. That's why they worked so hard to create a peaceful society. They were afraid of what humans might become if they kept fighting. On the planet Kepler 442b, Major Helen Clark was leading a rescue mission. The Korthak had attacked the colony but hadn't destroyed it completely. They wanted slaves, not corpses. Helen's team was moving through the ruins of the colony's main city. They had to find the survivors before the Korthak slave ships arrived. "Movement ahead," whispered her sergeant. Helen looked through her scope. Korthak soldiers were patrolling the street. They were huge, covered in black armor, carrying weapons that could cut through steel. Helen felt that same strange feeling that Tony Brooks had experienced. Time slowed down. She could see exactly how the enemy soldiers would move, where they would look, when they would be vulnerable. Wait here, she told her team. Major, there are 12 of them and one of you. Helen was already moving. She slipped between the ruined buildings like a ghost. Her rifle found targets she hadn't even consciously aimed at. In 30 seconds, all 12 Korthik soldiers were dead. Her team stared at her. How did you do that? Helen didn't know. She had moved and fought like someone with 20 years of combat experience. But she had never been in a real battle before in her life. Professor Alex Morgan was a geneticist at Earth University. When the attack started, the government asked him to study blood samples from the pilots and soldiers who were showing unusual abilities. What he found changed everything. The DNA is rewriting itself, he told the emergency council meeting. The stress of combat is activating dormant genetic sequences. Sequences that have been sleeping in human DNA for thousands of years. What do these sequences do? Asked Admiral Collins. They enhance everything related to warfare. Reflexes, spatial awareness, tactical thinking, even the ability to predict enemy movements. It's like humans have a genetic memory of every battle their ancestors ever fought. The council members looked at each other nervously. Are you saying we're evolving? Asked the president. I'm saying you already evolved. Millions of years ago, humans aren't naturally peaceful. We became peaceful by choice, but the capacity for war never left us. It was just sleeping. The Korthak were having problems they had never experienced before. They had conquered hundreds of species, but humans were different. Every battle brought new surprises. Emperor Vorthak reviewed the reports from his fleet commanders. The humans are adapting too quickly, he said. Their tactics change every day. Their soldiers fight like they have decades of experience. Perhaps. We underestimated them, suggested his advisor. Impossible. Our intelligence showed they had been peaceful for centuries. They should have been easy prey. But the reports kept coming in. Human fighters were destroying Korthik ships that should have been untouchable. Human soldiers were winning battles they should have lost. Human commanders were making decisions that seemed to come from nowhere but worked perfectly. Captain Tony Brooks was back on Earth reporting to General Mitchell. His fighter had been damaged in the battle, but he had survived when dozens of other pilots had died. Explain to me what happened out there, Kate said. Tony tried to find the words. Was like I remembered something I had never learned? Like there was another person inside my head, someone who knew exactly how to fight? Kate nodded. She had been feeling the same thing. When she looked at battle plans, she could see solutions that hadn't been there before. When she gave orders, they came from knowledge she didn't remember acquiring. The other pilots who survived, she said. Are they experiencing the same thing? All of them, and it's getting stronger. Dr. Hughes brought his research to the meeting. I think I know what's happening, he said. Humans weren't always peaceful. For most of our history, we were warriors. The best warriors who ever lived. He showed them images from archaeological sites. Ancient battlefields where humans had fought with stone weapons. Medieval castles where knights had learned the art of war. World War trenches where soldiers had faced impossible odds. Every generation faced conflict, he said. Every generation learned new ways to fight and survive. All of that knowledge is encoded in our DNA. The peaceful centuries just put it to sleep. And now it's waking up, Kate said. Because it has to. The Korthik represent the same kind of threat our ancestors faced. An enemy that wants to destroy. Everything we've built? Our bodies are responding the only way they know how. The meeting was interrupted by an emergency alert. Another Korthik fleet had been detected heading toward Earth's inner colonies. This one was twice as large as the first attack. Admiral Collins looked at the young officers around the table. A week ago, they had been peacekeepers and explorers. Now they were becoming something else. Something that had been sleeping in human DNA for 300 years. We need to evacuate the colonies, someone suggested. No, Kate said. Her voice was different now, harder. We need to fight. General, our fleet is outnumbered 10-1. Kate smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Then we'll have to be smarter than they are. Luckily, we're very good at that, She looked at the battle plans on the screen. Strategies were forming in her mind, tactics that no military academy had ever taught. She could see the entire battle. Before it happened, could predict how the enemy would move and how to counter them. The Korthik think they're fighting the same species they studied during first contact, she said. They're wrong. They're not fighting the humans who chose peace. They're fighting the humans who chose war. The room fell silent. Outside the window, Earth looked peaceful and blue. But inside the planet, something ancient was stirring. Something that had been waiting for 3 centuries to wake up. The Korthik Empire had made a mistake. They had assumed that peaceful meant weak. They had forgotten that the strongest warriors are often those who choose not to fight until they have no choice. Captain Brooks checked his weapons and prepared for the next battle. He wasn't the same pilot who had flown patrol a week ago. None of them were the same people they had been before the war started. They were becoming what humanity had always been underneath the peace and the civilization and the gentle words. Fleet Admiral Ryan Davis stood on the bridge of the battleship Liberty, watching his fleet move through space. 6 months ago, he had been a simple transport captain. Now he commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled. The change in him was obvious to anyone who looked. His eyes were sharper. His movements were more precise. When he spoke, people listened in a way they never had before. Even he could feel it, knowledge flowing through his mind that he had never learned but somehow knew. Admiral, the Korthik fleet is moving into position, reported his tactical officer. Ryan looked at the battle display. The enemy had brought 800 ships to attack the industrial world of Titan Prime. Ryan had only 200 ships. Most of them converted civilian vessels with hastily mounted weapons. Any normal military leader would have retreated. But Ryan wasn't normal anymore. None of them were. Signal all ships, he said. Begin pattern Omega 7. His bridge crew looked confused. Pattern Omega 7 wasn't in any of their training manuals. It wasn't in any manual anywhere. But somehow, every ship captain in the fleet knew exactly what it meant. Dr. Nina Campbell watched the battle from Earth's orbital command center. She had been studying the changes in human brain patterns for months now. What she saw on the medical scanners frightened and amazed her. The neural pathways are completely different, she told her assistant. Look at Admiral Davis's brain scans from 6 months ago, then look at them now. The images showed a dramatic change. New connections had formed between different parts of Ryan's brain. Areas that controlled spatial thinking, pattern recognition, and strategic planning were now working together in ways that shouldn't be possible. It's like his brain rebuilt itself for warfare, her assistant said. Not just his. Every human in active combat is showing the same changes. Their brains are becoming optimized for military thinking. On the screen, they watched Ryan's fleet execute maneuvers that looked impossible. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, attacking the Korthik from directions they couldn't defend. It was like watching a dance, if dancers carried weapons that could destroy planets. Colonel Jack Thompson was leading his Marines through the ruins of New Shanghai Colony. The Korthik had taken the planet 3 weeks ago, but they hadn't expected humans to come back for it. Jack's unit moved through the destroyed city like ghosts. They didn't need to communicate with words anymore. Somehow, they all knew what the others were thinking. When one Marine spotted an enemy patrol, the entire unit knew about it instantly. "How are we doing this?" whispered Private Anderson. Jack didn't answer because he didn't have an answer. His Marines were fighting with skills. That took decades to develop, but most of them had never been in combat before the war started. They moved like a single organism with one purpose. The Korthik soldiers they were hunting were veterans of 100 conquered worlds. They should have been able to crush any human resistance easily. Instead, they were being picked off one by enemies they couldn't see coming. Jack watched a Korthik patrol through his scope. He could predict exactly where each alien would move, when they would turn, where they would be vulnerable. It was like watching a movie he had seen before, even though he knew he hadn't. His rifle fired once. The patrol leader fell. Before the other Korthik could react, Jack's Marines had eliminated the rest of the patrol from 6 different directions. "Target down," Jack reported, moving to next objective. But he wasn't moving randomly. None of them were. They all knew exactly where to go next, what to do, how to hurt the enemy most effectively. The knowledge came from somewhere deep inside, from a place that remembered every battle humanity had ever fought. Captain Sarah Blake commanded the destroyer Vengeance. Her ship was hunting Korthic supply convoys in the Outer Rim. Sarah had been a cargo pilot before the war. Now she was sinking enemy ships with tactics that came from nowhere. "Captain, I'm detecting a Korthic convoy," her sensor officer reported. 12 cargo ships, 4 escorts. Sarah looked at the tactical display. The enemy convoy was moving through an asteroid field, using the rocks for cover. A normal attack would be suicide. The asteroids blocked most approach routes, and the escorts were heavily armed, but Sarah could see a way through. She could visualize exactly how the asteroids moved, where the gaps would be when her ship could strike without being detected. "Take us into the field," she ordered. Silent running. Her crew obeyed without question. They had learned to trust Sarah's instincts. Even when those instincts led them into situations that seemed impossible, the Vengeance slipped between the spinning rocks like a fish swimming through coral. Sarah's hands moved over the controls, without conscious thought, adjusting course by tiny amounts to avoid detection. When they emerged behind the convoy, Sarah's weapons were already trained on the perfect targets. The Korthic escorts exploded before they knew they were under attack. The cargo ships surrendered without firing a shot. "Another successful raid," her tactical officer said. Sarah nodded, but part of her mind was already planning the next attack. She could see the enemy supply routes like lines on a map, could predict where the next convoy would be, how to intercept it most efficiently. The knowledge scared her sometimes. She was becoming someone else, someone who thought about war the way other people thought about breathing. Commander Eric Stone worked for military intelligence. His job was to figure out how the Korthic were organized, how they thought what they would do next, but lately Eric was learning things that weren't in any intelligence report. When he looked at enemy fleet movements, he could see patterns that revealed their entire strategy. When he studied Korthic communications, he understood not just what they were saying, but what they were afraid to say. "The Korthic Emperor is losing control," he told the command staff. "His fleet commanders are starting to question his orders." "How can you know that?" asked General Mitchell. Eric pointed to the intercepted messages on his screen. "Look at the delay patterns in their communications. The pauses between question and answer are getting longer. That means the subordinates are hesitating before they agree with orders." That could mean anything." "No," Eric said with certainty that surprised him. "It means they're scared. The Korthic have never faced an enemy that learns as fast as we do. Every battle we get better. Every battle they lose more ships than they expected to." He pulled up a tactical analysis that had taken him only minutes to complete. A week ago, the same analysis would have taken his entire department days to finish. "They're changing their invasion plans," Eric continued. "Originally, they planned to conquer Earth in 6 months. Now they're talking about a 2-year campaign. They're having to adapt their strategy because we're not behaving like the species they thought they were attacking." Back on the front lines, Ryan Davis was proving Eric's analysis correct. The Battle of Titan Prime had been a complete human victory. 800 Korthic ships had faced 200 human ships, and the humans had won, but it hadn't been a normal victory. Ryan's fleet had moved with precision that defied explanation. They had anticipated every enemy tactic, countered every strategy, exploited every weakness. The Korthic fleet commander had sent a message to his emperor before his ship was destroyed. The message was simple: they fight like they can read our minds. Ryan stood in his command center, looking at the wreckage of the enemy fleet floating around Titan Prime. His victory should have been impossible. But somehow it had felt easy, like he had fought this exact battle 100 times before. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a priority message from Earth Command." The message was from Commander Stone, Intelligence. had intercepted Korthik communications, discussing humanity's impossible tactical abilities and supernatural coordination. The enemy was starting to realize they weren't fighting the same species they had studied during first contact. Ryan smiled. The Korthik had made the mistake of thinking that peaceful meant weak. They had awakened something that had been sleeping for 3 centuries, something that their ancestors had encountered long ago and decided was too dangerous to fight. Dr. Campbell's latest research confirmed what everyone was beginning to understand. The changes in human brain structure weren't random. They followed patterns that could be traced back through history. Every major war, every great battle, every desperate struggle for survival had left marks in human DNA. The peaceful centuries hadn't erased those marks, they had just covered them up. Now, under the pressure of extinction, humanity was remembering what it had always been. "We're not becoming something new," Nina told the Emergency Council. "We're becoming something very old. Something that fought its way up from the caves and forests and plains of Earth, something that survived every threat this galaxy has ever produced." The Korthik Empire was about to learn what that something was capable of. On distant worlds, human resistance groups were using tactics that no military academy had ever taught. In space, human fleets were winning battles they should have lost. In the halls of power, human leaders were making strategic decisions with a clarity that came from millions of years of evolutionary pressure. Humanity was waking up. And when it was fully awake, the galaxy would remember why some species choose to sleep. Supreme Commander Lisa Parker stood in the war room deep beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by holographic displays showing battles across 50 star systems. 6 months ago, she had been a diplomatic advisor. Now she commanded the entire human war effort. The transformation in her was complete. Her mind could hold the details of 1,000 simultaneous operations. She could see patterns across galactic distances, predict enemy movements weeks in advance. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Status report." She said, "Sector 7 fleet has destroyed the Korthik staging area at Proxima Base," reported Admiral Davis. "Sector 12 Marines have liberated the slave camps on Kepler 438b, intelligence reports. The enemy is pulling back from 15 systems," Lisa nodded. The war was going better than anyone had dared to hope. But she knew it was far from over. Dr. Matt Williams had become the head of Earth's weapons development program almost by accident. Before the war, he had designed peaceful mining equipment. Now he was creating weapons that seemed to design themselves. "The new fighters are ready for testing," he told Lisa. "But I have to warn you, the design process was unusual." "How so?" Matt pulled up the blueprints on his screen. The fighter looked like nothing that had ever flown before. It was sleek and deadly, with weapon systems that seemed almost alive. "I didn't really design these," Matt admitted. "The plans just came to me, like I was remembering something instead of inventing it." The engineering team had the same experience. We all knew exactly what to build. The new fighters were unlike anything humanity had ever created. They responded to pilot thoughts instead of controls. They moved like living creatures instead of machines. When Captain Dan Miller climbed into the first prototype, it felt like putting on a second skin. "Control, this is Miller," he said into his radio. "Beginning test flight." But as soon as the fighter launched, Don realized this wasn't going to be a normal test. The ship seemed to know what he wanted before he thought it. When he imagined turning left, the fighter was already turning. When he thought about speed, the engines responded instantly. "Miller, your performance readings are off the charts," ground control reported. "You're pulling maneuvers that should be impossible." Dunn smiled. Nothing felt impossible anymore. The fighter wasn't just a machine he was piloting. It was part of him, an extension of his will and instincts. Admiral Karen Brown commanded the 7th Fleet from her flagship, the Retribution. Her ships moved through space with coordination that amazed even her own officers. When she gave orders, her captains understood not just what to do, but why to do it. "Enemy fleet detected," her sensor officer reported. 200 Korthik ships moving to intercept our convoy." Karen looked at the tactical display. Her fleet had only 60 ships, but she wasn't worried. Numbers didn't matter anymore. What mattered was understanding the flow of battle, the rhythm of war. All ships implement Pattern Delta 9, she ordered. Pattern Delta 9 didn't exist in any manual. Karen had just invented it, pulling the strategy from some deep part of her mind that knew exactly how to hurt the enemy. Her fleet moved into formation like dancers following music only they could hear. The Korthek fleet charged forward, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a web of crossfire and coordinated attacks. Karen's ships struck from 6 directions at once, hitting targets with precision that defied belief. In 30 minutes, 200 enemy ships had been reduced to floating wreckage. Karen's fleet hadn't lost a single vessel. "Admiral," her tactical officer said quietly, "how did you know that would work?" Karen couldn't explain it. The strategy had come from somewhere beyond conscious thought, from a place in her mind that understood war like breathing. General Chris Johnson led the ground assault on Tau Ceti Prime. The planet had been a Korthek stronghold for months, defended by their best troops and strongest fortifications. Previous attacks by other species had failed completely, but Johnson's Marines weren't like other species. They moved through the enemy defenses like ghosts, striking from shadows, vanishing before the Korthek could respond. Every soldier knew exactly where to be, when to attack, how to coordinate with their teammates. "Echo Team, you have Korthek reinforcements moving to your position," Johnson radioed. "Already handled, sir," came the reply. "We saw them coming 10 minutes ago," Johnson smiled. His soldiers were predicting enemy movements with supernatural accuracy. They fought like they had been born for this war, like they carried the memories of every battle humanity had ever fought. The Korthek defenders, veteran warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, found themselves outmatched by humans who moved and fought with abilities that seemed impossible. Fortifications that had held for months fell in hours. Elite units that had never retreated began abandoning their positions. Dr. Williams continued developing weapons that shouldn't have been possible. Particle beams that could punch through any armor, missiles that could think for themselves. Defense systems that anticipated attacks before they happened. "The weapon designs are becoming more sophisticated," he told Supreme Commander Parker, "but also more intuitive. It's like we're remembering technologies we never invented." Lisa understood. Humanity wasn't just awakening dormant fighting instincts. They were remembering the tools of war, the weapons and strategies that had been encoded in their DNA by millions of years of conflict. The war had changed everything. Human society had transformed completely in less than a year. Children played games that would serve as advanced military training for other species. Ordinary civilians could spot tactical weaknesses and strategic opportunities that professional soldiers from other races would miss. On the streets of Earth cities, people moved differently. Their eyes were sharper, their reflexes faster. The peaceful society of 3 centuries was gone, replaced by something that had existed long before recorded history. Captain Miller's new fighter squadron was decimating Korthek forces across multiple systems. The alien pilots couldn't understand how human fighters could move the way they did, anticipate attacks that hadn't been planned yet, coordinate without apparent communication. "Their pilots fly like they share one mind," a captured Korthek officer told his interrogators. "They know what we will do before we know it ourselves." The prisoner was right. Human pilots had developed a form of battlefield awareness that transcended normal communication. They could sense each other's intentions, coordinate attacks through instinct rather than orders. Meanwhile, the Korthek Empire was experiencing problems they had never faced before. Client species that had served them for centuries were beginning to rebel. The news of human victories was spreading, and conquered races were starting to believe that the Korthek could be defeated. Emperor Vorthak met with his war council in his fortress on the capital world. The reports from the front lines grew worse every day. "The humans are not behaving according to any known patterns," his military advisor reported. "They adapt faster than we can counter their tactics. Their strategic thinking operates on principles we don't understand. What are you saying? The Emperor demanded. I'm saying we may have awakened something that was better left sleeping. Our intelligence files contain references to human conflicts. From their pre-space era, the combat footage shows abilities that shouldn't be possible. The advisor activated a holographic display showing battles from Earth's world wars. Human soldiers moved with coordination and tactical awareness that defied explanation. They fought with a ferocity and intelligence that had allowed them to survive conflicts that should have destroyed their species. Their peace was not weakness, the advisor concluded. It was restraint. They chose not to be what they were capable of becoming, but now that choice has been taken away. Supreme Commander Parker received reports of victories from across the galaxy. Human forces were liberating worlds, destroying Korthic fleets, turning the tide of a war that had seemed hopeless only months before, but Lisa knew the real battle was yet to come. The Korthic were falling back to their core systems, consolidating their forces for a final desperate assault. Intelligence suggested they were preparing to use planet-killer weapons rather than accept defeat. They're scared, Admiral Brown reported, from the front lines. The Korthic are fighting like cornered animals now. Their discipline is breaking down. Lisa studied the strategic displays. She could see the shape of the final campaign forming in her mind, could predict how the enemy would move, where they would make their stand, how humanity would end this war once and for all. Begin Operation Prometheus, she ordered. Operation Prometheus was the most complex military campaign in human history. It required perfect coordination between thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, and dozens of fleets spread across half the galaxy. Any normal species would have needed years to plan such an operation. Humanity planned it in 3 days. Admiral Davis launched his fleets toward the Korthic core worlds. General Johnson's Marines prepared for the largest ground assault ever attempted. Captain Miller's fighters swept ahead of the main force, clearing the way for the invasion. Dr. Williams watched from Earth as his weapons performed beyond all expectations. The humans weren't just winning battles anymore. They were dismantling an empire that had ruled for millennia. War Marshal Jake Peterson stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Apocalypse, watching the final battle unfold. 1 year ago, he had been a simple security guard on a space station. Now he commanded the largest military force in galactic history. The transformation was complete. Jake's mind could process battlefield information from 1,000 different sources simultaneously. He could see the entire war as a single, living thing. When he gave orders, they flowed through the human fleet like thoughts through a single vast mind. Status report on all fronts, he said. 7th Fleet has broken through the Korthic outer defenses, Admiral Brown reported. 12th Army has landed on the enemy capital world. The Korthic home fleet is surrounded. Jake nodded. Operation Prometheus had worked perfectly. In 72 hours, humanity had dismantled an empire that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Dr. Rachel Adams watched the final battle from her laboratory on Earth. For months, she had been studying what humanity had become. The results frightened her more than the Korthic ever had. The genetic changes are now permanent, she told her assistant. Human DNA has been completely rewritten. We're not the same species we were a year ago. On her screens, she could see brain scans from soldiers across the galaxy. Every human in active combat showed the same neural patterns. Their minds had restructured themselves for warfare, creating new connections that allowed for tactical thinking. Beyond anything previously recorded, are we still human? Her assistant asked. Rachel looked at the data. Human children were now being born with enhanced spatial awareness and tactical instincts. The changes were passing to the next generation. We're what humans become when the galaxy forces them to remember what they really are, she said. Fleet Admiral Nick Carter commanded the final assault on Korthic Prime. His armada numbered over 5,000 ships, but they moved as one organism. Every captain knew exactly where to be, when to strike, how to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. The Korthic Home Defense Fleet was the strongest in their empire. Over 2,000 ships protected their capital world, supported by orbital weapons platforms and planetary defense systems that had never been breached. Nick looked at the tactical display and smiled. The defenses were impressive, but they had been designed to fight normal enemies. Humanity was no longer normal. All ships begin Pattern Omega Prime. He ordered. Pattern Omega Prime was so complex that no computer could have calculated it. Required every ship to move in perfect coordination with every other ship, attacking from angles that created cascading failures in the enemy defense grid. The human fleet moved like a living storm. Ships appeared where the enemy least expected them, struck at precisely the right moment, vanished before return fire could reach them. The Korthic defenders found themselves fighting shadows that struck like lightning dot in 2 hours. The most powerful defense fleet in galactic history was reduced to floating debris. General Maya Singh led the ground assault on Korthak Prime. Her armies had landed on the capital world while the space battle raged overhead. Now they were fighting through the streets of the enemy. Capital City, Maya's soldiers moved through the urban warfare zone like they had been born in it. They anticipated enemy movements, coordinated attacks without communication, struck from directions that shouldn't have been possible. The Korthak elite guard, the finest warriors in their empire, found themselves outmatched by humans who fought with abilities that seemed supernatural. Every tactical advantage the aliens tried to use was countered before they could implement it. "General, we've reached the Imperial Palace," reported Colonel Thompson. "The Emperor has sealed himself in the command bunker." Maya studied the tactical display. The bunker was deep underground, protected by energy shields and automated defense systems. It should have been impregnable, but Maya could see exactly how to breach it. The knowledge came from somewhere beyond conscious thought, from the same place that had given humanity all their impossible victories. "Proceed with Plan Delta 7, she ordered. Plan Delta 7 involved a coordinated assault that exploited weaknesses in the bunker design that no normal analysis would have revealed. Maya's engineers knew exactly where to place their charges, when to detonate them, how to create a cascade failure in the defense systems. Captain Luke Nelson flew his fighter through the chaos above the capital city. He had become something beyond human, a pilot whose abilities transcended the physical limitations of his aircraft. His fighter responded to his thoughts as if it were part of his body. Around him, the final space battle was ending. Korthak ships were surrendering or fleeing. The mighty empire that had terrorized the galaxy was collapsing in real time. Luke's communication system crackled with reports from across the galaxy. Human forces were accepting the surrender of Korthak fleets in dozens of systems. Client species were declaring independence. The 1,000-year empire was dying in a matter of hours. Emperor Vorthak sat in his bunker, watching his empire crumble on the tactical displays. The humans had done the impossible. They had destroyed a military force that had conquered hundreds of civilizations. "How?" he asked his advisors. "How did a peaceful species become this?" His military commander pulled up files that had been classified for centuries. "They were never peaceful by nature, Emperor. We found records in the ancient archives. Earth was quarantined by the elder races millions of years ago." Quarantined? Why? Because humans were considered too dangerous for galactic civilization. The elder races encountered them during their primitive period and determined that they were apex predators of unprecedented capability. Vorthak stared at the ancient records. They showed early humans hunting creatures that outweighed them by tons, using nothing but stone tools and tactical coordination. They showed human tribes surviving in environments that would kill most species. They showed a species that had evolved to be perfect warriors. The elder races tried to contain them on their homeworld, the commander continued. But they knew that eventually humans would reach the stars. So they left warnings that we ignored. The bunker shook as explosions echoed from above. The humans had found a way through defenses that had been designed to be impenetrable. "They chose peace," Vorthak said quietly. "For 3 centuries? They chose peace, and we made them choose war." The final explosion breached the bunker's main door. Human soldiers poured through the opening, led by General Singh. They moved with the fluid coordination that had become humanity's signature, covering every angle, anticipating every possible threat. Vorthik looked at the humans and saw something that made him understand why the ancient races had been afraid. These weren't just soldiers. They were predators that had learned to use technology, warriors that had evolved beyond the need for hatred or anger. They killed efficiently not because they enjoyed it, but because they were designed for it. Emperor Vorthik, General Singh said, by the authority of the Human Protectorate, you are under arrest for crimes against sentient species. The war was over. War Marshal Peterson received the surrender of the Korthic Empire from the bridge of his flagship. Around him, his staff coordinated the occupation of enemy worlds, the liberation of slave species, the dismantling of the galaxy's most powerful military force. All Korthic fleets have surrendered, Admiral Carter reported. Their client species are requesting protection under human authority. The Empire no longer exists. Peterson nodded. In 1 year, humanity had gone from a peaceful species to the dominant military power in the galaxy. They had fought a war that should have been impossible to win, and won it completely. Dr. Adams completed her final report on humanity's transformation. The results were clear and terrifying. Humans had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a species capable of perfect warfare while retaining their essential humanity. We didn't become monsters, she wrote. We became what we always were underneath the civilization and the peaceful words. We became the apex predators of our own world, scaled up to galactic proportions. The establishment of the Human Protectorate changed everything. Other species understood that the sleeping war gods were now awake, and any threat to galactic peace would face the complete military might of humanity. But the humans didn't become conquerors. They became guardians. They used their new abilities to protect the weak, to prevent the kind of aggressive expansion that had characterized the Korthic Empire. Captain Nelson continued flying patrol missions, but now his job was to keep the peace rather than fight wars. His supernatural piloting abilities were used to intercept pirates and smugglers, to rescue ships in distress, to maintain order in space lanes that had been chaotic for centuries. General Singh retrained her armies for peacekeeping operations. Her soldiers used their enhanced tactical abilities to prevent conflicts before they started, to protect refugees, to rebuild worlds that had been devastated by war. Admiral Brown's fleets patrolled the galaxy not as conquerors but as protectors. Her ships responded to distress calls, mediated disputes between species, ensured that no other empire could rise to threaten galactic stability. War. Marshal Peterson established his headquarters on a neutral world at the center of the galaxy. From there, he coordinated humanity's new role as the guardians of galactic peace.